Hello everyone, welcome back to Daska Discusses. Today I'm going to do something different. I'm going to give you guys my top 10 greatest comedies of the 90s. Let's do this. Number 10. Ice Cube, Chris Tucker, $200 owed to a dealer down the street. 90s, South Central porch setting. Yep, I'm talking about Friday. Well, they made a few sequels of this one, but the original Friday, made in 1995, has that classic, I guess you could say, South Central nostalgic feel of when you see Ice Cube and Chris Tucker sitting on that porch, and then Debo rides past with his bike. It screams 90s, and of course the obvious catchphrase with a "damn!" Yeah, we all love that as well. But Friday's number 10 on my list in the top 10 comedies of the 90s. Number 9. Oh, behave. Who throws a shoe? Honestly. Yes, I'm talking about 1997's classic film Austin Powers, which introduced the world, well, Mike Myers introduced the world to his fictional character of Austin Danger Powers, the secret agent from the 60s that's transported right into the 90s. And well, we see what happens. He meets Liz Hurley and all these other characters that come in there. Now, I guess you could say some of the jokes these days are bit crude and off color that wouldn't go down well, but back then Austin Powers was a classic, still is to this day. Part 2 and 3 were good too. You know, you had Fat Bastard and all those other characters that came into the sequels, but the original Austin Powers had so many great one-liners. It is number 9 on my list. Number 8. The first Adam Sandler film on this list, yep, goes to Happy Gilmore. Well, with Happy Gilmore, you've got the hockey player turned golf pro, and if you've ever played golf, you've always had one of those Happy Gilmore moments where you just scream at the ball, why won't it go into its home? That's your home. That's your home! All that kind of stuff. Now, with Happy Gilmore, it just really works well in terms of like seeing the character grow, and in terms of like going into the golf PGA tournament, coming up against Shooter McGavin. You've also got Carl Weathers in there as well. There is some really great lines in this film, and Ben Stiller's cameo as the nurse in the old folks' home is classic, with the whole, well, you will go to sleep or I'll put you to sleep. Love it. Number 7, a film that introduced us to two key characters of the 90s, iconic characters, being Jay and Silent Bob. Yes, I'm talking about 1994's Clerks, directed by Kevin Smith. Now, film may not be, you know, the biggest like laugh you could ever imagine, but I think in this film it's not about the slapstick humor just like other 90s films. This one's all about dialogue. It's basically just about Dante and Randall, two guys working, one at a convenience store on his day off. He comes in, then you got Randall at the video shop next door, and what happens in retail and in their lives on this particular day. Now, if you haven't seen it, it's a classic Kevin Smith film in black and white, which is interesting as well, but I think it holds its spot really well in a top 10 90s classic. I mean, seriously, what other film are you gonna have a whole conversation about the Death Star and the workers that worked on the Death Star in Star Wars and what happened to them, etc, etc. Now, you just have to watch the movie to see it's conversations and dialogue, witty dialogue like that. Plus, you've got Jay and Silent Bob in there with their classic lines outside the store. It's iconic 90s. 1994's Clerks is number 7 on my list. Number 6 on my list. Alrighty then. Well, you can say, you know, people say, well, Ace Ventura 1 was better than 2, or 2 was better than 1. I'm more a fan of Ace Ventura Part 1, Pet Detective. When Nature Calls was okay, and people might not agree with it, I think Ace Ventura 1 has smarter jokes, the less slapstick jokes, and the less gross out jokes than Part 2. I just think the whole thing, Finkle Einhorn. It's one of Jim Carrey's best films. Now, I'm not going to compare it to Part 2, let's not talk about it, but in terms of where it stood back in 1994, it was getting to that peak of Jim Carrey's career as well, and I think that Ace Ventura is an iconic 90s character. It's an iconic 90s comedy with Jim Carrey when he was just basically in every second film that came out in the 90s. But these days, how would it go down? I think if anything, Ace Ventura these days, if it was released, wouldn't get, I guess, the critically acclaimed comedy that it is at. Maybe it might be a tad offensive, especially in the last act of the film. But we'll leave that for now. But for its time, and for a top 10 90s film, it sits at number 6 for me. Number 5, Extreme Close-Up. Wow! Yep, I'm talking about 1992's Wayne's World with Mike Myers and Dana Carvey. So many one-liners, swing, swing. So many epic scenes in this. Bohemian Rhapsody in the car scene. Well, we saw what happened at the Oscars with that. That was a great cameo by both of them. But this one here, it skyrocketed Mike Myers' career in the 90s as well. Now, granted, you could say, oh, what else did he do after this film? Hey, let's not forget Shrek. A lot of pop culture references from the 90s as well. And especially the scene with the selling out scene with the pizza, the Reebok, the... I can't do it anymore, it's giving me a headache. Here, take 2 of these. Classic scenes, okay? There's so many great scenes in all these films, but Wayne's World deserves to be in the top 5. Now, Wayne's World 2 was great too. And, you know, just like Ace Ventura, they've both got their pros and their cons, but the original Wayne's World stands at number 5 on my list. Number 4 came out in 1999 and it spawned many sequels, and the characters, if you speak to anyone who grew up in the 90s and saw this film, they'll know who they are. Even the new age, even the younger people of today who may have seen the prequels, sequels or whatever. But yes, I'm talking about American Pie. Again, with American Pie, why I believe it just works so well. Yes, it's a bit of a gross out comedy. It's a high school comedy. There is some really gross scenes in it as well. But it's in that kind of realm from, I guess you could say, Animal House. But with American Pie, I believe it was the last definitive 90s film. Obviously it came out in 1999, but if you want to capture that moment right before the internet blew up, before Facebook, before WhatsApp and everything, and smartphones, 1999, I think it just really captured that iconic time of the 90s. And I remember I was around the same age of the characters in the film when the film came out, and yeah, that's how the internet was, and that's how the fashion was, that's the dialogue, the terminology, everything like that really worked well. It's definitely number 4 on my list in the top 10 90s. Number 4, American Pie. Number 3, not so much a 90s film. It was made in the 90s, but it was set in the 1980s. Another Adam Sandler classic, I'm talking about The Wedding Singer. I think it's Adam Sandler's best film. Now, in this, I think it's really iconic and people love it because people that grew up in the 80s can laugh at all the 80s references, but also the fact that it was with a key 90s cast like Drew Barrymore and Adam Sandler, you know, even Buscemi's in there as well, Buscemi, whatever you want to say. But I think the mixture of all that and the pop culture references to the 80s really make this film, and it was a great romantic comedy. Little things like having the DeLorean in the car and all the little references to 80s films as well really works well. Big fan of The Wedding Singer. Adam Sandler's best, I think, number 3 on my list. Now, number 2, people may not agree, the Coen brothers' best film, a cult following, people apparently have a religion around the main character around this. The cast works perfect, the storyline's a bit all over the place. Now, the first time you're watching this, you're probably thinking, what is this actual film about? I'm talking about The Big Lebowski, the dude. Now, Jeff Bridges plays the key role as Jeffrey Lebowski, and you've got other cameos by Philip Seymour Hoffman, John Goodman, Steve Buscemi again. The Coen brothers really did it well here. The use of the dialogue, the script works perfect. The humor in it is interesting. Now, if you're used to films like Ace Ventura and, you know, a lot of Jim Carrey or Adam Sandler films, the humor in this is a lot different. I still think it's number 2, the greatest film of the 90s, and it's still iconic to this day. The Big Lebowski is one of the most important comedies of the generation of the 90s and even of today. Why so? Well, you just have to watch it and take it for yourself. But in terms of why it's so funny, I just think it's the cast. It's the perfect amalgamation of the cast and the script and the craziness of the story and where it goes and where it leads to. You can have a look at Another White Russian again, and yeah, they peed on your rug. That's all I'm gonna say. The Big Lebowski, number 2 on my list. Now, some honorable mentions before I get to number 1. I'm not gonna go into why they're, well, here they are. Night at the Roxbury, Liar Liar, a Jim Carrey classic, Something About Mary, Franks and Beans, Robin Hood Men in Tights, and the last honorable mention, Groundhog Day, Bill Murray, Same Thing Happens. every day for him. He wakes up, it's Groundhog Day. Didn't make it, but still a classic honorable mention in my book. Number one. The number one 1990s comedy in my book. I went to the movies and saw this the same year that I think Pulp Fiction came out. My parents went to go watch Pulp Fiction and I was, well, they're like, okay, go with your cousin and go watch this. Yep, I'm talking about Jim Carrey, Jeff Daniels, Dumb and Dumber. From the first minute in this film to the end, you really can't beat Dumb and Dumber in terms of like 90s comedy. Yes, some of the jokes are crude and some of the jokes are gross out jokes and disgusting or whatever, but these two characters, their mission to deliver the money back to this girl that Jim Carrey's character Lloyd meets, and their journey across the country to do that, and the lines in this film and the scenarios, the setting, everything in this works well. I like it a lot. Like really, it's scene after scene of comedy gold, and I think I believe it's number one in my book for the 90s, and the sequel really did destroy it. You know, let's not even talk about Dumb and Dumberer, forget about that. I'm talking about Dumb and Dumber 2. I think they should have just left the legacy at number one because this is iconic and you can't get any more 90s than Dumb and Dumber. It's number one on my list. Dumb and Dumber, Jim Carrey, Jeff Daniels, number one. Well, that's it guys, that's a wrap for my top 10 90s comedies of all time. Hope you enjoyed the list. Here they are here. If you think I've missed something or you want to rearrange the list, please let me know in the comments. If you like this video, don't forget to leave a like. And if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more and be notified, don't forget to hit subscribe, tap the notification bell, and I'll see you guys on the next episode of Daska Discusses. Boom!